Welcome to Gaytopix, My Life. I'm your host, Kenny Cruz, the only host to bring you the latest headlines and breaking news in the LGBTQ. This is my life. From sexually assaulted and abused, neglected, dysfunctional family life and upbringing in the hood where I faced racism, discrimination, bullying, several altercations, displacement, and forced to live on a system, hiding my identity just as I was coming out of my shell, only to be forced back inside during my high school years and eventually into the Army and the NYPD and the adult entertainment industry, and now the fact that I'm not on social media anymore. I hate to describe myself as, or to compare myself to the one-term, twice impeached, former disgraced President of the United States, but yes, I too am blocked from Facebook. I feel my platform would have grown much more than what it has now, and it will allow me the resources to to be shared and my platform to grow. But unfortunately, I'm blocked from the platform. So Instagram is my only outlet. I also am not on social media anymore as my authentic, real self. The only social media I have is my broadcasting talk show, and that's Gaytopix, and this is what you're viewing. This is Gaytopix in a special series I'm calling My Life. I have hundreds of videos, testimonies, stories, things that have happened to me in my life. My life, real stories and real events, and they all transpired and made me the person I am today, which essentially is invisible. Recently, I've done a couple episodes and I had to cut them short because my neighbor is extremely nosy and noisy, and I could not concentrate, nor do I want people in my business. More importantly, people who don't want to associate with me. I've lived in my neighborhood now 15 years, and I don't know my neighbors at all. Nor did any one of them give their condolences when my dog passed away, knowing that they've seen me every single day, if not every day, with my dog Bill Clinton, and I haven't received any condolences. At this time, I'm not going to fret on it because it's not. If it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen. I got a new dog anyway, and no one has even asked me where my old dog is, and it's quite disturbing. It's even more disturbing is the story that how I got my new dog, Bingo, and I've explained that in a past episode of Gaytopix, My Life, because it was very traumatic to me. And as a war veteran, it was very disheartening to know that no one had my back. No one's ever had my back. No one's ever supported me or said that they were proud of me or encouraged me in anything that I do. So I kind of feel at a certain point that I'm wasting my time, and there is no purpose if no one is here to listen to my story and my truth. How can I be comfortable with who I am and my truth if I can't be honest and forthright with my past? Your past shapes and molds you into the person you are today. My past, as I alluded to earlier, it was very dysfunctional and very traumatic in so many ways. But what I've noticed throughout this series that I've been doing, looking back at all these videos and podcasts, listening to all the podcasts and reading all the transcripts, is that you see a mental health transition just by me talking to a camera. And I think anyone can agree after watching the full series, which will eventually be released on my YouTube channel at Gaytopix. So please follow, like, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for the premiere. But you will see that there is nothing wrong with me mentally, and I feel that is just a stigma to put me in a box and to put me in a category of where these people need to fill quotas or need to prescribe medications just to make profit off of you. I'm going to talk about something very personal to me. I gotten to the point where I just started basic training, but this is way after basic training when I came home, and I think I need to talk about this now because I can't sleep, and it's really early in the morning, and it's been troubling me for some days now. So we're going to call this episode Doctor. Again, these are real life events. These are true stories. These stories are not fabricated or fake. These are actual events that happened to me in my life. Some viewers may find what I'm saying disturbing, so viewer discretion advised. All rights are reserved. Again, this is Gaytopix, My Life. I'm your host, Kenny Cruz, the only host to bring you the latest headlines and breaking news in the LGBTQ community. However, we're not talking headlines and breaking news. We're talking about my life, my story. People often say, speak up to be heard. But sometimes when you speak up to be heard, again, you're put into a box and stigmatized all over again. Did you know that when you attempt suicide or even call the National Suicide Hotline Prevention Crisis Hotline or seek therapy, it's a red flag on your permanent record? People are like, oh, you don't even have a permanent record. Yes, you do. Your permanent record is your credit. So if you are evicted from your home, that's on your record. And, you know, when you're applying for future apartments, they see that and are less likely to, you know, grant you tenancy. So when you attempt suicide or put into a mental health facility for evaluation, or even have an evaluation done by a psychologist or the fact that you're even seeing therapy, you're stigmatized. Seems like everything that I've faced in my entire life, I've been always stigmatized and not able to be my real self. And I'm always pretending to be something that I'm not, or trying to change myself and adjust myself to get people to like me or be the way they want me to be. And it's never made me happy because I'm doing these things to further my career and gain success, and yet I'm ignored and blocked and thrown under the bus. Which is why I want to talk about Dr. Oliveri. My doctor, Dr. Oliveri, was my doctor when I came home from the military. An IED bomb blew up in front of me, and I had to come home. When I came home, most of my family had passed away, and I had no idea because this was before phones and texts and Facebook and all that. So I was writing letters and no one was responding to me. My family was dysfunctional, but I expected at least, like, how you doing or how's it going, but I've gotten nothing in the 10 years of service that I served. And when I came home, they were all gone, and, well, my immediate family. My mother prevented us from knowing my father's side because I believe now, I've said this in past episodes where I've actually had proof that my father is not my father. My mother cheated on him and got pregnant, and he eventually divorced her and she married another guy, and he became my stepfather, and he was the one who sexually assaulted me for numerous years. I reached out to the police, I reached out to teachers, I reached out to ACS. No one really listened, and when they did listen, they put me in an environment that was far worse than the actual environment that they were taking me away from. And so when I complained, I guess at the time, no one believed me that it was actually happening because all I wanted to do was go back home because it was safer than being in a detention center full of criminals. And it just made it really difficult to be who I am, and I became sheltered and shy and isolated and didn't have any friends, didn't want to talk to anybody. And so I joined the military to get away from it all. But when I joined the military, it was don't ask, don't tell, and I couldn't even talk about what I was actually feeling, for fear of being dishonorably discharged. But I served my time, and when I came home, they gave me a doctor, and my doctor essentially became a father figure to me. That's one thing I always look forward in a doctor, someone with knowledge, someone who I can trust, someone who I can rely on, someone who has their best interest in my health, and someone who's going to listen. And he was essentially a father figure to me because he knew what had happened and was there for me, and anything that I needed, he helped me. But more importantly, I came to him I think I was like 140 pounds, 150 pounds. And he changed my life because I was a shy, gullible, innocent kid. Well, a man, 28. But with his prescribed cocktail, I became a model. I was not afraid to take off my shirt anymore. I was very proud of what I have done to my body and the accomplishments that I have done, because I went from a flat chest to a chest that was like the rocks. And in fact, it was one of my best attributes was my chest and my stomach. And I was very proud to show it off because I was one of those people who always wore their shirt in the pool, or didn't want to expose myself in that way, And each time that I did it, people appreciated it and liked it and loved it, and it made me feel validated and vindicated of having a self-esteem, essentially, because I had no self-esteem, just like I do now. I don't have self-esteem, and I don't find myself attractive, especially at this age. But his prescribed cocktail of medications and supplements were able to shape me into a Greek god, essentially. And I wanted to use those assets to be visually put on display for everyone to see that they can do it too. But in the end, I was put back in a box, and no one really liked me and cared about me. They didn't even like my body anymore. And if they did like my body, that's all they did was like my body and not what was inside my head. So I was always alone, and I'm still alone. But Dr. Oliveri changed my life in so many ways, and I enjoyed working out. I never liked the gym, but because of the cocktail of medications, he kept me youthful, he kept me muscled, he kept me active, he kept me social, he kept me working, he kept me alive. And most people with HIV at the time looked like Skeletor, and I was far from looking like that because my doctor prescribed a cocktail of medication to keep me youthful and beautiful, and to keep me having a job as a model and actor. And no one suspected that I had HIV, Even to this day, people don't think that I have HIV. Not that I talk to anybody or anybody knows any personal information about me, but I've said it in previous episodes of Gaytopix, but no one watches them. Which again, I'm reluctant to release this series, Mylife, because it's very deeply personal, and no one's been watching my show, and my show is not visually the way I want it to be, and you all need a team of people to help you be successful, and I don't have a team. It's just me by myself, and no matter how many YouTube videos I watch, I still can't do everything by myself. I can't. To do a talk show every day, you have to write a script, you have to do research, you have to investigate, you have to find the authenticity of the story so my credibility will not be on the line. You have to post it, you have to talk about it, and each story that I do can take up to 1 or 2 days. In my first series, I was doing daily shows, and with the stories and the editing and the formatting and things like that, I would film on a Monday. I wouldn't have that episode ready until 2 weeks later, and I could not keep doing that over and over and over again every single day. You know, even now that I'm doing this series, My Life, there's so many videos I can't edit them or get the dramatizations right for me to visually express my life and my story, and it's very difficult to do alone, and I find myself alone in everything that I do, and it's not 100% because I don't have the assistance I need. Let's think about OnlyFans. These people are having sex, so how do they have the time to actually edit and produce movies on a weekly basis? They have a team of people doing that for them. Their websites are updated because they have a team of people. Their itineraries are made by assistants and agents and things of that nature so they can fly across country to film. I don't have any of that. I'm not in the industry anymore because of what they did to me. And that's why I wanted to talk about Dr. Oliveri, because he put so much work into me and making me beautiful and giving me that self-confidence that I needed. But yet it wasn't beautiful enough to garner any type of work in the modeling industry or the adult entertainment industry or even in the acting industry. And I went to the Lee Strasberg School of Acting. Uta Hagen was my teacher, and I studied on camera, and I also studied Acting Technique 101, and I think there's a few other courses, but what has it done for me lately? Nothing. Everything I do, I don't seem to feel like it's accomplished because it's not visually the way I want it or the way I envisioned it to be created. Part of my inspiration of doing Gaytopix is from ABC 7NY, the #1 news in New York City. I would love to have, as I'm speaking, a video and then transition into the video of what I'm talking about, or be live on a scene in the snow, rain, sleet, or snow, but also have that, video there that I can be able to transition to immediately. But I can't do that live without any assistance or technical help. In this world of COVID, 2 years and a half now, I've never actually Zoomed. I've never actually FaceTimed. I was just looking at my phone the other day. I got the iPhone 12 when it first came out. Do you know, since it first came out, which is like 2 years ago, I've never used it to its full capacity or usage, and it just sits there. Nobody calls me, nobody texts me, nobody does anything, and it just sits there silent, and there's no reason for me to pick it up. But Dr. Oliveri had an aneurysm, and when he had an aneurysm, he wasn't the same anymore. He was about 78, so he should have retired long ago, but I was very emotionally connected to him like I was with Bill Clinton, because he was the only one I essentially talked to. Um, we made a promise to each other that each time that I saw him, I would make an appointment for every month, regardless if I was feeling ill or not, or if something was wrong. But when we did that, we developed a relationship and we got really close. There was one time he had fainted and I had to perform CPR on him. There's another time that my appointment, he was late for my appointed time, but when I got into the office, he was wearing pajamas. Well, because he lived right upstairs from his office. So there's another time I caught him watching porn. There's another time that he was watching Brad Pitt in some movie, you know, because he had this concept of youth and muscles to combat the side effects of HIV, you know, and it worked. And in fact, it's still practiced to this day. He's wrote many journals or many essays in the medical journal and various other publications in the medical field. He's also written 6 books. So he had his knowledge, and it was, you know, working for many of his patients who were HIV positive. And he retired, and when he retired, I was no longer on that cocktail of medications because most doctors found it to be too much, and I was going to get a heart attack. I already had a stroke, you know, but it wasn't because of the cocktail. It's from smoking. Um, I smoke to this day because it's nothing else to do. I find myself that I need to do it. And it also reminds me of the good times of when smoking was legal, before it was banned. I would light my cigarette and, well, people would light my cigarette and I would just hold it to my mouth, and people would come to me and hold conversations with me, and I would get to meet a lot of people just by simply smoking, and I continue to do it. I first started smoking when I was in the military. Because we're not allowed to smoke, or we're not allowed to drink, or, you know, do any type of illegal activities as far as, you know, narcotics and alcohol. So sometimes we would drink NyQuil. But others found refuge in smoking cigarettes and Cuban cigars. And I smoked a Cuban cigar once. Never again. Because I inhaled it, and I wasn't, it was my first time, and Joe Sargent allowed me to take a pull, and I inhaled it, and I literally was coughing up my lungs. I felt like I was like, my lungs were just about to come out of my mouth. It was a horrible taste. It's like never again. They also say smoking a cigar is like smoking 10 cigarettes at once, you know. So I went to the ladder of cigar smoking, and I started smoking cigarettes with other privates, and we would do it on the weekends, and it was so relaxing compared, you know, because we were under so much stress, and it was very relaxing, and I would smoke one, and then that eventually led to 2 to 3, and then 1 pack, and then 2 packs, and, you know, I've been smoking now for over 20 years. And I believe that's where I had my heart attack from, was from smoking, and you'd think it would make me stop. I was told that my grandmother had passed away from lung cancer, stage 4, when she found out, and only had months to live, and eventually died after 3 weeks. And she was told on multiple occasions to stop smoking. And she was smoking those cigarettes from, they were called Benson and Hedges. There were no filters. So she was smoking these cigarettes, and they were essentially killing her, but she still kept smoking. She wasn't afraid of dying, and neither am I. But does that mean that I'm going to kill myself or commit suicide? This is the thing that really bothers me, is that you can't be truthful with your words because you're going to be stigmatized, canceled, or blacklisted, or shunned, or made fun of, or body shamed, or shamed altogether. So, how can you be truthful and transparent with what you're saying if you have to walk on eggshells? You know, part of this cancel culture, I believe, there shouldn't be any cancel culture, for one, because when you do something wrong, you should be held accountable for it, regardless of whatever those repercussions may be. You need to be held accountable for what you're doing. But for what I see as a grown man who is 50 years old, I'm beginning to see something in a different light. As I said, all throughout my life, people have told me I see things through a different lens. And this is the lens that I'm seeing this cancel culture as. People who are being canceled are from another generation. Whoopi Goldberg, she's not technically canceled, but you might as well put her in that category. Various football players, and even Sharon Osbourne, remember? And she was screaming at Cheryl Underwood, like, tell me, tell me, tell me. When you have to say that you're not a racist, there's a problem. You know what I mean? So I think with the millennials and what's happening in this world, especially with racism at this current time in this country, and the millennials with their new set of ideas and technology and stuff like that, our older generation has not caught up with it yet. For instance, let's talk Paula Deen. Paula Deen, remember, she was fired from the Food Network for using the N-word. But she was from Georgia. She heard it every single day. She commonly heard it, and she commonly used the phrase, you know, the N-word, every single day. Same with me. I grew up in the projects. I heard that word every single day. It was told to me. I used it, you know. But does that make me a racist? No. But it's the generation that's changing, because it was acceptable at that time, and it's no longer accepted now. And the older generation of people are the ones being canceled because they haven't caught up with the new generation of the millennials and the Gen Zs and so forth and so on. And that's the unfortunate part, because in order to have these conversations, perhaps you need someone younger to come in and have the conversations with that person so they can be aware of what they're doing. Again, as I said, just because you talk about mental health does not make you aware. Just because you talk about racism does not make you aware. You know, it's sad that that's how it has come to be, and the older generation is the one suffering, when the older generation is the actual ones who went through the most hell to get to where you are today as a young 20-something-year-old kid. it's difficult because, like I said, it was accepted at that time. Now, Norman Lear is the producer of Good Times and a couple, All in the Family, and The Jeffersons, and a couple other shows. And Jimmy Kimmel has started to remake the shows and do it live in front of a studio audience. But each time that he does a new show, like he just did The Facts of Life and Different Strokes, Norman Lear comes out and gives a disclaimer, because of the language and the content and, and the format of the show. Some people may find disturbing. And so he has to have a disclaimer at the beginning because, again, as I just said, those times were different and it was accepted back then. It's not accepted now. So you can't fault someone for how they are because that's how they were raised and that's how their life has been up until that point where someone actually confronted them about their past. As I said many, many times in this series, My Life, your past shapes you to who you are today. And it still, again, does not make you a racist because you're talking about things that you talked about in your life. It's just very difficult, and it seems to me like it's a catch-22, and this whole cancel culture is just blown way out of proportion. Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, I miss him because he was a good leader, and granted all the charges have been dropped, but he was canceled, and yet here we are with the former disgraced, one-term, twice impeached president still not held accountable for what he did on January 6th, and the things that he said, the hush payments that he gave to Stormy Daniels. Even Stormy Daniels has won with her lawyer, and she still has yet to go to court for who. So it's kind of like, how is he getting away with this? But he's a perfect example because we knew he was a bigot before, so he wasn't going to be any different once he became president because he was a bigot once he became president. In fact, it was even 10 times worse than when he wasn't president, but people still accepted him, and he has yet to be canceled. If anyone should be canceled, it's him. But this is how the world works, and it seems that the innocent ones, or the ones that really shouldn't be canceled, are the ones being canceled or made an example out of, and it's just unfortunate. It really is. Because again, if we have these conversations, then the cancel culture wouldn't even exist. Think if we didn't even have the GOP, the Republican Party, that whole phrase, cancel culture wouldn't even exist. But we're not talking anything political because this is my life, my story. All rights reserved. Remember, you're always in the mix with Gaytopix. I guess that's it for now because it's 5 o'clock and I'm going to try to get some sleep. I can see my bags under my eyes. And I just want to share a little bit of information with you. Now that it's quiet and you can hear me, and he's probably sleeping and he can't hear me. So I do believe that because people, when you call the crisis hotline, it's like, do you hear voices and do you hear people talking to you and stuff like that? There have been many times I've looked out my people and seen the police lurking outside the door, the situation that I've gone through with Bingo. There were people lurking outside my door trying to listen in to my apartment. You know, the walls are so thin in this apartment that you can hear the neighbor next door, so he can hear my conversations or hear what's on my television, you know, especially when Bill Clinton died, because there was that echo, you know, and it made things amplified. So, yes, I do hear voices and I do see people, you know. That's how the police, I guess, try, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure that they know someone's home so they can bust in and arrest the individual or suspect. That they lurk outside the door to listen for noises to make sure the person is home so they can break in, you know. I don't talk back to the voices. I don't hear voices. I don't talk back to the walls. The walls don't talk to me. Um, I talk to myself a lot, but I talk to myself in front of the camera or on a podcast, you know, so I'm doing this constructively. As I said, throughout this entire series, and when I release it, I'm going to release it unedited. So you're going to see so many different mental progressions and declines in my state, you know, physical state. But just because I was going through those crises, does that make me crazy? Listening to everyone else's opinion, certainly it does. But I know myself and I know what I've gone through and what I haven't gone through. And there's a big difference between grieving and being dehumanized and stigmatized than being depressed and wanting to kill someone or yourself. I've never wanted to harm anyone in my life, and I served the war. And in fact, serving my country is the reason why I would never hurt anyone. I'm not that type of person to do such a thing. Genuinely a very easygoing guy. I'm become shy and sheltered all over again and isolated. Well, because I am isolated now, I've become sheltered and shy. And as a kid, I always wondered why people said I was shy, but I know now it's because I never went anywhere. I never did anything. I didn't have any friends, and, you know, it's the same now. So it has nothing to do with being shy. It's being sheltered. You're not street smart. You're not out there engaging with the public. And me having a life of public service, it's quite difficult not to be in the public setting, you know, or be a contributing member of society. But I've been doing this for 50 years, and this series, My Life, I hope will be the reflection that I need, so I won't have to go through the next 50 years living my life as I did. And I hope that this will change. Because speaking about it, again, maybe somebody will hear me. Maybe somebody will understand. Maybe somebody will offer help. Maybe somebody would want to be my friend. Maybe somebody would want to hold a conversation with me or meet up with me so we can come up with some solutions. There's nothing wrong with me. I just need a friend, you know. Moreover, I probably need someone to cuddle with. No one's ever slept in my bed. No one. And I'm 50 years old, and that's a shame, you know. I've been the only one in my bed, and I would love to cuddle and go to sleep with somebody. because there's nothing like body heat to keep you warm on these cold nights. And I don't have that. And I never did. But as I said, I just wanted to get Dr. Oliveri out there. And I miss him just as much as I miss my dog, Bill Clinton. I am going through severe atrophy. My body is slowly wasting away because of what people have done to me and how they made me feel. Because it was no point in spending all those hours in the gym perfecting my body and my mind and my shape for nothing. People say, oh, you're doing it for yourself. No, I was doing it to get work, because I remember working at David Barton Gym, and they were hiring trainers. Pit crew for RuPaul's Drag Race is somewhat similar, or Andrew Christian models. You have to look a certain way to be presented a certain way. No one's going to hire me as a personal trainer if I have a belly or I don't have the body that they desire or want. Same thing in movies. No one's going to watch my movie if I'm not physically fit, because I have to be camera ready. And I was doing so much and working out so diligently and hard every day. I did not take a day off. I was working out 4 hours every single day. And my body was so tight. And this went on for years because I was hoping that somebody would hire me, and it wasn't just the adult industry. It was various industries in the modeling field and acting. And nobody would give me that opportunity. I can remember applying for literally just about every single airline. There was Emirates, British Airways, Continental, United, Delta, and JetBlue. Oh, and Canada. Canada Airlines. I don't know the name of, but it was for Canada. And I remember going through the process for each and every one of their interviews, and yet everyone told me I should be a flight attendant, but I was never hired. I even had a reference for Continental. I had a pilot. I met him in a bar, 14-year pilot, and he gave his name and information to use him as a reference when I went on my interview at Continental, and it didn't work. So they always said, like, when you go on the interview for a flight attendant, that if you don't do your fingerprints, you're not hired. I remember particularly with Continental, the yearly salary was $22,000 a year. And I could not do no more than 80 hours a month. And I was on reserve for 3 years. Being on reserve means you have to have a bag ready and willing to go at any given time. So they call you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, we need you on this flight. You have to go, So they always recommended that you live within close proximity of an airport. Continental Airlines hub at the time, because they're no longer in business, was in Newark Airport. I lived in Jersey City, so it was a short cab ride for me. But I remember going on this interview. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and there were so many people there. It was like over 500, and they were only filling one position for a flight attendant. One. So I felt like it was like American Idol, and they were trying to, make, squeeze and vet the process so there would be a small handful of people that they can actually concentrate on it and eventually hire one of them. So when I first got there, it was 5:30 in the morning. I was quite surprised that when I got to the airport, there was no coffee or there was no donuts or anything. It just we were there and we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and 7 o'clock comes in the morning, and as we're talking to each other, you can actually see, who can possibly be a flight attendant or not. Like when you look at a certain people, they belong in the jobs that they have. Like a teacher looks like a teacher, so she belongs as a teacher, or the mailman looks like a mailman, so, or the UPS guy. Some people are made to, they look like the jobs that they have and made to be in that particular job. And talking to some of the, potential flight attendants, I would see them like, oh yeah, you have flight attendant qualities and characteristics. Yeah, you're definitely gonna fly high. No pun intended. And I remember they put us in groups, so they separated us. And the first part of the test was that we had to make the announcement, with the airbags and the oxygen being deployed. So it was something along these lines, like, welcome aboard JetBlue flight number 130 to Miami from New York City. Weather in Miami is a cool 78 degrees, partly cloudy, with chance of showers. Duration of the time is 3.5 hours, so forth and so on. So once I did that, and everyone else did it, I was handed a slip, a piece of paper, and it said, go to the Starbucks in gate 7 and meet me there in 15 minutes. I'm thinking I'm going to meet the person who gave me the slip. So I ended up going through the terminal and going to the Starbucks and sitting there, and somebody was sitting there waiting for me, and they introduced themselves, and I went on to the next thing, and it was a simulator, and once I got through that simulation, it was the same thing. I got handed a slip of paper, and I went on and on and on, and so forth. So this went on till like 5 o'clock in the evening. So I'm thinking, maybe, yes, I'm going to get my fingerprints. That's what's taking so long, But the very last part of the interview, I remember the pilot telling me that I had to wear the colors of the uniform because that would give me points on the interview. So I wore gold and black. In fact, I actually had an associate of mine at the time who worked in Celine. He also worked at Vogue, so he was able to give me a Burberry suit, and I wore a Burberry suit because it was the colors of Continental Airlines. And so I'm sitting there, and they commented on my tie because it was gold, and I had to cover the holes in my ears for my earrings, so I had to wear makeup there. I also had to wear makeup on my face. I couldn't cross my legs. I couldn't take notes. I also couldn't touch my face, and I had to fold my hands on my lap and just sit there. And there was 3 of people, representatives from Continental, and they were throwing questions at me left and right, left and right, left and right, and I'm like, yes, 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 and it just got so confusing. But I handle myself well under pressure, and in fact, I like being in those environments because it makes me work extra hard to find a solution to finish my task, and she asked me at the time, Martha Stewart was in jail. So one of the representatives asked me, name a woman in your life who you look up to. I couldn't say my mother because my mother was my mother. And that was actually the answer to the question, was your mother, I couldn't say my grandmother because my grandmother had passed away, and I can't look up to someone who's passed away. So I went with what I truly felt was honorable and honest. And I said Martha Stewart. She looked at me with kind of like a like what face, with a poker face, and she was like, "I." It's a unique answer. So, which I thought because it was a unique answer that I would definitely get hired because no one would have said that. And she said to me, "I'm curious, why would you pick Martha Stewart?" And I said, "Well, she's currently in jail because she made a mistake. She owned up to her mistake. She's doing her time, and she's still a multi-billionaire. To me, that's someone worthy of looking up to because that's somebody that I would want to be. Because if I made a mistake, I would want to, you know, apologize and continue on being the businessman that I am or businessman that I want to be and continue my life as it was before I made the mistake. And I learn from the mistake and I grow from the mistake and I pay for the consequences of the mistake. Again, there's no need to cancel. You just be held accountable for the mistake that you made. And apparently that was the wrong answer because I didn't get my slip. And next thing I know, a security guard is taking me through some side entrance and I'm being put on a bus and they take me to the terminal and tell me to go home. And of course, they always say, don't call us, we'll call you. And that's eventually, you're not hired. And I wasn't hired. So I went on to the next airline, and the next airline was British Airways. My grandmother was a flight attendant on the Continental, and the Continental was a plane that was faster than speeding light and made so much noise. And she injured herself because the pilot had moved the plane while she was prepping for the passengers to get on. And she hurt her back, and to the day she died, she was still collecting compensation, even though the airline was no longer in business. I hear now the rumors that the Continental plane is going to come back, and you can fly to Los Angeles in less than 2 hours, which I think is impressive. But, I thought for sure I would get on there, but it didn't work either. JetBlue was the same, and the interview process for each airline is essentially similar in all aspects, in all ways. So once they caught on to my name, going from one airline to the next, they stopped it because I knew the process, and I knew like if I didn't get my fingerprints, I wasn't getting hired. But I also knew that I had to be given a slip to meet other, representatives to continue on with the interview process. There was another one for United Airlines. United Airlines, I got a ticket to fly first class to their hub in Chicago. And I was so excited because I had interviewed in New York and they thought I was a good candidate to meet with the higher ups in their hub in Chicago. So they flew me first class to Chicago, and I was so grateful because I didn't eat that morning. As I said, they want you there at like 5:30 in the morning for the red eye out. And it was so early in the morning, and I get there, and now it's like 9 o'clock their time, and I'm sitting there waiting to be interviewed. It wasn't like Continental or JetBlue or the Concorde where there were so many people. It was only like a small handful of people. As I said, I think when you were interviewed in New York, they selected you and a small group of people, let's say like 12 people, to fly to Chicago and be interviewed on a one-on-one basis. So I get called in for my interview, and I hand her my resume, and she's sitting there looking at my resume, but didn't tell me to sit down. Now, I've been to so many resume classes and been through so many resume workshops and job workshops and things of that nature to know that you cannot just walk into an interview room and sit down. You have to be told to sit down. More importantly, usually when you shake the person's hand, that's when they tell you to have a seat. So I gave her my resume and everything and shook her hand, and she didn't tell me to sit down. So I'm standing there and she's asking me questions like, oh. So I sit down and she says, "Did I tell you to sit?" And I stood up again and I said, "I apologize." And she continued to ask me questions standing up. And she says to me, "Well, I'm going to ask you a few questions. So if you don't mind, you know, would you like to answer these few questions?" And it's like, oh, I'm so eager to answer the questions and I've been waiting for these questions. So, you know, throw them at me. She wasn't finished speaking, and she said that to me. She said, "I wasn't finished." And when she said that, I was like, well, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just following along with you and agreeing with you that I was so excited that you were asking me these questions, and I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait for you to answer the question, ask me these questions. I wasn't finished, and I was like, okay. And as I sat down, I kind of knew that the interview was not going to go anywhere because of what she said and the tone of her voice. And sure enough, just like with all the other airlines, after the interview was finished, a security guard took me to a secluded gate, and I was actually flown back home. And I didn't get hired. Just for that one simple mistake. But what really is concerning and alarming is that the vetting process is so difficult and so extreme, but you're only getting paid 20 something thousand dollars a year and only allowed to make a certain amount of hours and on reserve duty for years. Which means, like I said with Continental, for 3 years you have to be on reserve. That means for 3 straight years you have to be ready at all times and only make but so much money. And only so much money because you have to take out the uniform and the travel expenses and all that other good stuff. And so you barely have a paycheck at that. So most people who want to become flight attendants are really not interested in the money. It's just more about the flying and the experience. To me, I wanted to be a flight attendant because it's a uniform, and I love wearing uniforms. Uniforms make me feel important, and I look good in a uniform. But it never worked out, and eventually they caught on to me, and I couldn't apply for a flight attendant position anymore, even years later. So that opportunity was thrown out the window, 40,000 feet in the air. Anyway, I guess that's it for now. Thank you for listening to my story. Again, this is my life. These are real life stories. There's nothing fake or fabricated about my story. This is my life. Some people may find what I'm saying disturbing, so viewer discretion advised. All rights reserved. Again, this is my story, and I'm your host, Kenny Cruz. This is Gaytopix, My Life. I'll see you soon.